Hey, so this is Intergenerational Trauma Radio. I'm your host, Fran Leibowitz, and I'm here with the people who did the Holocaust.
What?
So, speaking of, picture this. There is a podcast contest, all right? Mm-hmm. And there are several people running. We're actually in the running, TrueAnon.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, we had run before a few years ago.
But we didn't win.
We were kind of robbed of it.
Really?
Yeah. I don't want to get too into it. A lot of hard feelings on it.
Who won?
It's like a Nazi podcast.
Oh.
Joseph Goebbels' Radio Hour.
Okay.
It's done by his grandson.
Who's also named Joseph.
Yes. Yeah. We actually didn't even really get to go head to head with him. Long story. But there's a new contest, right?
Okay.
And it's us, the Anti-Pedophile podcast. We're in the running.
Mm-hmm. TrueAnon.
Looking pretty good, yeah. It's us. We're running against Serial. Serial, which is a shitty podcast. Who's pro-murderer. We're running against them. And we have one of our little baby brother podcasts that's running too.
Oh,
People
that's
think
nice.
it's kind of like that. It's another podcast that says it's anti-pedophile.
Oh, okay.
That we've gone on their podcast maybe once. They've come on here. Well, they haven't come on here, but it's there's been a little bit of back and forth there, and a lot of people start to think we're the same thing. We're like, there's no difference between us,
Or that like maybe we're in cahoots together.
exactly. But there is one difference between our podcast and their podcast. Well, one immediate difference to people who don't really know podcasts. They're hosted by two women.
Okay.
But there's some kind of weird stuff. Like, first of all, our policies aren't exactly the same, right? Like, we're anti-pedophile. They sort of have this, people have this impression they're anti-pedophile, but they're not really anti-pedophile, are they?
So like if you listen to them, like maybe they kind of walk back their anti-pedophile stance?
Yeah, like maybe the pedophiles, like we just kind of got to even the pedophilic out. There's like too much pedophilia, but like it's like the actual core concepts of pedophilia are pretty good, right?
Oh, like
So
we could regulate pedophilia to be like, okay.
the conscious pedophile. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Exactly. And
compassionate pedophilia.
the compassionate pedophilia, precisely.
Okay.
And there's really only can be one winner of this contest, right? And we're doing pretty good, but this podcast has no chance.
There's no chance of winning?
No chance. And this podcast, by the way,
Because it doesn't have as many listeners.
no, like the podcast is called Anon.
Oh, Warrenon.
Anon.
Okay.
And another weird thing about the two hosts of it is at one point they claim to be black. And yeah, they claimed to be black and said they had black heritage.
But they don't.
Turns out they don't. They're white.
Okay.
They look really white too.
That's
It's kind of weird because Joseph Goebbels' Radio Hour had all these shows. They called them Michael Jordan, all this stuff. And now it's weird if we bring up the fact that these two white women
Michael Jordan
pretended to be he is a black man.
Okay.
That these two white women pretended to be black. We're not allowed to talk about that now because a racist guy talked about that.
Oh, because if we say anything, then they'll say, "Oh, horseshoe, you're the same as
you
Joseph
guys are doing a
Goebbels'
little,
hour."
Exactly. And so now there is a real chance that this supposed anti-pedophile podcast, who's not really, is going to take down the only true anti-pedophile podcast in our contest to win this.
Right,
this
because
race.
there's the other thing you said. Serial was in the mix, right?
Yes.
And that's the loser, boring one. Mm-hmm. But so you're saying that by the wishy-washy Warrenon being in the contest, that it's sabotaging our chances of being able to beat out Serial
Exactly.
to go head to head with Joseph Goebbels.
And all the podcast journalists out there in the podcast trade magazines, well, they don't really like us too much.
Well,
right?
how come?
Well, because, as I said before, we are against pedophiles. We're anti-pedophilia.
We're very adversarial.
And it turns out that a lot of these journalists kind of like pedophilia. In fact, they almost to a man work for pedophiles.
Right.
And when we say, like, hey, wait a minute, we're getting all this negative press because we're anti-pedophile, could it be because, the Washington Post is owned by a pedophile? Allegedly owned by a pedophile? And everyone's like, no, dude.
Right, and if we were to get rid of pedophilia, then those journalists at the trade magazines wouldn't have jobs because they're paid by pedophiles.
Even though we have a robust plan for small pedophile journalism.
Which no one wants to talk about in the trade magazines.
No one wants to talk about that in the trade magazines, no. So
you think that if you wrote for a trade magazine and you were in the midst of
a huge pedophile-sponsored
crackdown of the podcast trade magazine industry.
Yep.
Maybe you'd be interested in a plan to save the industry.
But no.
Because you
coward.
Too
lower than
busy
a dog.
Sucking the teat of the pedophile industry.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about a literal physical teat. There is a large one located in upstate New York.
It's similar to the Wall Street Bull.
Exactly. It's actually about a city block wide, and it's made out of organic matter with a huge, grotesque nipple that one pedophile journalist stands on one side of, another stands on the other side of. They squeeze using their shoulders, kind of like a football-style press. And then every other pedophile journalist on their it's kind of like the Hodge, except for pedophiles. They go there once a year. They fill up large slop buckets of pedophile milk, and then the rest of the year they sit at their fucking desk in their fucking little New York fucking 13th floor or 14th floor. There are no 13th floor bullshit fucking offices, and every fucking day they think about our podcast and they stick their fucking faces in that goddamn thing of milk and just slurp like little piggies.
And that's how they get their blue check.
Yep.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come in. Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, that was an extended metaphor.
Yes. What we are talking about here is Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, and the little piggies that help her out.
Well, let's welcome the barnyard animals to the show, baby.